welcome to Retro Bassin'. Today I'm going to tell you the story about a man and a fish. Or should I say a man and a fish. The year is 1973, and the place is here on Lake Eufaula in Eufaula, Alabama. There, famed tournament angler and lure designer Tom Mann hooked a small largemouth bass on one of his creations, the strawberry-flavored jelly worm. Though he boated hundreds of thousands of bass before, Tom saw something special in this pugnacious 1-pound fish and took him home and placed him in his swimming pool he used to test other lures. Tom's wife Ann named him Leroy Brown after the Jim Croce song that came out earlier that year. Leroy was indeed a bad little fish. He quickly dominated the pool, and Tom eventually moved him to a 38,000-gallon aquarium at Fish World. Leroy took over that too. Though he was by far the smallest fish in the tank, he beat up every other fish inside, including a lunker largemouth, a 20-pound catfish, and even a toothy bowfin. Before long, Leroy had one end of the tank all to himself, as not another living creature dared to enter his territory. Leroy was smarter than your average bass. Until the day he died, he never again hit a lure or bait containing hooks. Tom decided to try to train him, and one of his greatest tricks became jumping through a hoop like a porpoise at SeaWorld. As a tribute to his pet bass, Tom developed the Leroy Brown lipless crankbait. It's a 1/4-ounce bait with dual sound chambers in the image of Leroy himself. The bait came in a couple different colors. We have here, which is sort of a pale looking bass color. More of a natural bass pattern. Tennessee bass. Here's a Leroy Brown ad from back in the day. This is in February of 1982. Leroy Brown, man's best friend. Named in honor of the world's most famous bass, caught by Tom when he was only a year old and weighed just 1 pound. As a special offer to get a commemorative brass belt buckle, 1 Leroy Brown lure, and a How to Fish Man's Baits book. Send $15 to Man's Bait Company. Well, lucky for me, I do have such a Leroy Brown belt buckle. This lure was discontinued sometime after 1987, but you still can find them on eBay. That being said, hold on to your wallet. A lure like this I've seen go for as high as $100 in auction on eBay. Now, I wouldn't spend that, but if you really want Leroy in a specific color, you're going to pay a hefty sum. It really looks like something you could see today from like a live target. Super realistic, super compact. I know it's only a 1/4 ounce, but it feels pretty solid. It has some dual sound chambers, and what I mean by that is here, you can see there are some smaller, more high-pitched rattles. Up here, it's more of a knocker. So when you shake it, you get both a knock and a high-pitched rattle. I am super excited to go fish this thing. The only thing I'm going to do before we hit the lake is switch out these hooks. They, any hooks that came with a lure back in the 80s, they were never that great. So I'm going to switch out those. Aside from that, I think we're ready to go. Well, enough talk about Leroy. Let's take him down to the lake and see if he is in fact a bad fish. So we're fishing a little main lake flat here. It is pre-spawn here in Texas. We are trying to find the fish, and we just got on the water a little bit ago. So I've got a little bit of 5 to 10 foot flat here that we're fishing just outside of a hot water discharge, which is just that way. Oh, there's one. Oh, there's a fish. Oh! All right, come on. Not a big guy, but a guy nonetheless. Got a little bass here, little largemouth. I would say pre-spawn largemouth. He looks pretty green though. I think he's been up in the shallow water for a little bit. And got it on the Tom Mann Leroy Brown. So not a bad little fish. Nice little green color to him though, huh? What's up, little guy? All right, we'll get him back. By the way, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've got my my lucky Tom Mann jacket on. After the trip to Florida, I've got to use every angle I can get, I got to tell you. Oh my gosh. That was a rough trip. This one's going to be a little better, I think. There's one. Might be a little better. That might be a little better fish. Yeah, a little better. A little better. Oh, come on. Oh, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is a little better fish. A little better fish. A little better. Tom Mann Leroy Brown fish. Look at that. Nice looking Texas largemouth today. Sweet. That is awesome. So the best move I did on this bait, I hated to do it, but I changed out the hooks. The hooks that this thing came with were, oh, they were garbage. They were terrible. So I changed out the hooks, put on some high-end hooks, and there we go. So there's our fish. Look at that. That's a nice looking spring largemouth there. Nice. Awesome. Awesome, solid Texas fish on the Tom Mann Leroy Brown. Nice. We'll let it go. All right, guys, we're back at the house. Had a pretty good day on the water with Leroy Brown. And I want to spend a few minutes in closing, kind of talk about the day and also some final thoughts on the lure itself. Honestly, I'm a little bit bummed that I'm going to move on to something else. I liked fishing the bait. It fished really well. We didn't catch a lot of fish, but we certainly got a nice one. It's been nearly 45 years since Tom Mann first came nose to nose with a bass that he would name Leroy Brown. And it's been nearly 25 since Mann's Bait Company discontinued this awesome lure. Look, I don't know if they're listening, but if the folks at Mann's are, I would really implore you guys to consider reintroducing the Leroy Brown. It's a great looking bait, it fishes awesome, and it would be the ultimate tribute to both the lure designer and that most famous of largemouth bass. Now let's get back to the story of the man and the fish. 8 years after that fateful encounter on Lake Eufaula, Leroy passed away from natural causes. In his book, Think Like a Fish, Tom described a funeral he threw for Leroy. It was attended by over 1,000 mourners, including the governor of Alabama, a eulogy by Ray Scott, and pallbearers the likes of Roland Martin and Hank Parker. Unfortunately, that night after the ceremony, grave robbers stole the satin-lined tackle box that contained Leroy's body. For the next 2 weeks, Tom scoured the world, and a $10,000 bounty later, Leroy's rotting body was discovered in a baggage claim in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was finally returned to Eufaula, where he was given a proper burial behind Fish World. Today, if you go down to Eufaula, a lot of things have changed. There's no more Leroy, and Tom Mann is also long since passed on. But you can still find a life-size marble statue that Tom erected for Leroy. And on it reads a final message to his feisty friend. It says, "Most bass are just fish, but Leroy Brown was something special." Now, before we go, I want to leave you guys with a little retro bassing conspiracy theory. When he died, Leroy reportedly weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces. I don't know if Leroy was a northern or Florida strain of largemouth bass, and I'm certainly no fish scientist. But I do know that the male largemouth bass rarely exceeds 5 pounds. I don't know how Leroy acted during the spawn, but it is entirely possible in the time before genetic testing that Leroy was in fact a she. Even Tom's bass fishing buddies like Bill Dance used to tease him about Leroy's possible gender. Of course, there would have been no way to rename the most famous bass in the world, and so Leroy will always remain the baddest man in the whole damn town.
And it's bad, bad, Leroy Brown, baddest man in the whole damn town. Better than old King Kong, meaner than a junkyard dog. Woo! Bye-bye.